Hello everyone, this is China Paradigm, where we, Dashi Consulting, interview seasoned entrepreneurs in China.
Hello everyone, I'm Matthieu David, the founder of Dashi Consulting and its podcast, China Paradigm. Today, I am with Matt Conger, the co-founder of Cadence Translate, which used to be named Panda, Sick Panda?
Seek Panda, yes.
Sick Panda, focusing initially on Chinese language and now with more than 20 languages. So you're providing translation services. I understood by reading about your company, it's embedded with technology, it's embedded with solutions, which you are going to talk about to us. To give people who are listening to us an idea of your company, you have built a community of more than 2,500 linguists. That I'm relying on your LinkedIn profile for
Sure.
this information. And you raised money, and that's something I'd like to know more about. Why did you raise money from 500 startups, for the founder of Dianping? Dianping is a huge company in China. I'm sure everyone who is listening to us know Dianping. And more recently, I think in 2017, you raised a Series A, or a more sizable round of investment to finance the growth. As far as I understand as well, you are very focused on the financial industry, due diligences, and I would like to understand also how you came up on focusing on the financial industry, and why, and what are the challenges that certainly a very, very demanding industry and very demanding clients. So thank you very much for being with us. You are currently in the US, in LA.
That's right. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So it's 7 a.m. in China, pretty early, but that's a good time to talk to LA.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
So anything I said was correct? Everything, do you have to correct anything?
No, we're always excited to tell our story and the stories of the clients that we see around us.
Could you tell us about the size of the company now? So I read on your LinkedIn profile that we talk about 2,500 linguists on your platform. Could you share some numbers, like size of the team, revenues, number of clients? We got some numbers from our note that you get several hundred of leads or clients every month. Where is this number? Like 300, 400 requests per month, where we got from the internet. You see, we do our homework.
Sure.
And up from 80 at the start. Yeah, that's what I have. So would you be able to share some metrics?
Absolutely. So first of all, our company is 5 years old. Our founding date was actually this past week. So happy birthday to us. We grew 75% last year in terms of revenue. And that was really driven by a focus on a lot of our core clients. On average, we're doing about 1,000 or so jobs per month. What a job means, we can talk about a little bit later if you want. Mm-hmm. And then the community that is servicing this pool, as you mentioned, is about 2,500 linguists worldwide. And when we say linguist, for anyone listening out there, we're using this to encompass both translators, interpreters, and even transcribers, all of which don't really call themselves linguists, but we find it's a convenient label. So in terms of the size of the employees, we have about a dozen or so in Beijing, where I started the company and where I used to live. And then we're adding more and more here in Los Angeles, and hopefully soon in New York as well.
I see. Could you tell us more about the solution you provide? Translation services have been in the market for ages, for decades. Mm-hmm. And based on what I know from you, I'm sure there's something you discovered, something bigger than just translation. Have you added technology? Have you added something specific? Also, when we deal with human beings, there is always something uncertain about the quality of the service. How do you harmonize? I believe it's a lot of challenges. Could you tell what your solution is offering and solving in terms of challenges that you found unsolved before you started the business?
Absolutely. So for us, the problem we always found was that our clients, they need a translator or an interpreter for a specific business objective. And that objective may change from month to month, from week to week, or even from day to day. So what our real value proposition is a search for the most knowledgeable person, and potentially augmented by whatever technology is available to bring that person into your meeting. So for example, every day we estimate that there are about 5,000 investor due diligence phone calls that are happening throughout the world. And that's a lot of due diligence projects that are crossing borders. That's a lot of due diligence projects where people want to focus on what is being said and not have to worry about taking notes or doing ancillary research. So for us, it was how can we bring a simple solution so that no matter where our clients are conducting due diligence, we can be there to help them out. So happy to share more about that, particularly in terms of product roadmap, but that was really what got us today, was this passion and interest in due diligence.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about, do you have technology? Have you developed your own technology, or you are using technology from others?
We're using technology from others. So for example, you and I, we're doing this over Zoom, and Zoom quietly announced a few months ago that they are going to offer simultaneous interpretation as a feature in their platform. Now, this is something that we don't think the community is particularly well trained to handle. So if all of a sudden all these enterprise clients had access to it, how would they use it? So we look to see the best solutions that are out there. You can also apply this on the transcription side when we look at the amazing advances that the Baidus, the iFlyTechs, and the Microsofts of the world are utilizing. So we think of ourselves more as an integrator than a developer.
Yeah, I strongly believe actually there's a lot of value for integrators, because there's so many solutions currently that selecting them, knowing the potential and the limits is already bringing a lot of value. We are using firm also a lot of softwares, and by knowing them and being able to use them, we are able to bring value to our clients. So I fully understand that. One thing about internal organization, how do you run the matchmaking with so many people? 2,500 linguists to use your wording, and one client. How do you match them to make sure it's the right person?
Sure. Well, that's our secret sauce, if you will, but really it comes down to what is the client looking for? And there are three options. They're either looking for domain expertise. So for example, I'm doing a due diligence on the solar industry. I want a solar expert. They're looking for format expertise. So for example, they have a 1 hour meeting with a famous Chinese CEO, and they want someone who's comfortable in that type of interview format. Or the third option is they just need somebody now, and they don't really care about the background. They want speed. And so what we try to provide is an understanding of, well, which of these three dimensions is the client prioritizing? And then from our community, how do we score various people along those dimensions? And then we matchmake accordingly. It's important. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Does it mean that you have a software, or it's on Excel, or it's in a Google Sheet? How do you work?
It's Salesforce, actually. So we as in terms of the entrepreneurial journey, started out trying to build all of our own technology and doing our own thoughtfulness. And then I discovered the Salesforce ecosystem about 2 years ago, and that has provided countless improvements to our efficiency. So that's how we're able to bring on more people, utilize dispatching algorithms, do matchmaking, et cetera. And it's not blocked in China. You don't need a VPN to access it.
Yeah, exactly. One of the solutions which is not blocked.
Right.
I'd like to understand why you raise money, because I feel you are running a business which actually has not developed property technologies, may not need so much investment. Where does the investment go into?
Great question. So we actually haven't raised money for about 2 years, because that was when we recognized, I think, what you're coming to, which is, hey, this is a great services business. You need to finance your growth, et cetera, but you're not dumping money into a technology arms race against Microsoft and Baidu. So we raised a seed round. It was 1.1 million USD in total. And really that was just about building a cohort of investors to give us credibility, to give myself some mentors and some reliable sources of just experience, and quite frankly, market validation. So for example, some of our investors come from the hedge fund world. Some of our investors are diplomats. And so just getting that external validation has been quite nice. But you are correct. This is not a traditional venture-backed style company. We focus on growing responsibly, growing profitably, and making our clients happy.
Yeah, I have some questions because I have an investor in my company, which is a consulting firm, but the origin is from another business I started actually before, and I pivoted after. So for some people who read our deck, they are very surprised that we have an investor. That's why I had this question for you about pricing. When you mentioned that you work for financial institutions, you work for hedge funds, you work in the financial sector, we correlate to high prices. So how do you price your service? Quality service, but high prices. So how do you price your service? Is it a profit sharing model with a linguist? And it's very standard, 70% for them, 30% for you. I don't know the percentage. Is it discretionary? And you may pitch different prices on different circumstances. How do you price?
Sure. So it's a great question. And I think one of the modest but important innovations we've brought to this industry. So we price using credits. So for example, a hedge fund comes to us and they said, I have these 10 calls lined up, and then I also need this prospectus translated. We'd say, okay, well, one call is one credit, and translation is this many words to a credit. And then they say, well, how much does a credit cost? And we say, well, if you just buy one, it's this price. If you want to buy 100, it's this price. So we give transparency and visibility into our volume discounts. At the same time, we're removing a lot of the per word or per minute charges that the industry used to love, because it just feels like counting pennies. I will say, as an entrepreneur, our original business model was profit sharing, 80-20, where we would just let the interpreters choose their own price and then we would split it. And that worked well in a model where we were going after a broader set of clients that were coming to a marketplace website. I'm sure we both remember O2O was the hot buzzword 3 years ago. But ultimately, we didn't find ourselves being differentiated when serving that audience. Whereas the finance community, we quickly grew our brand, and so we needed to adopt a different pricing model.
Would you position yourself and say you are a premium service in the translation area?
As far as I know, the most premium with regards to financial due diligence, for sure.
Okay, I see.
Which is all the more reason the name Seek Panda wouldn't have worked when we're trying to uphold a brand that aspires to the heights that we do. We needed something more less region specific and less cute, to be honest.
So one of the questions about, I go back to this question because I'm not very clear on how you harmonize the service, how you make it standard that you have the same quality with person A and person B, country A and country B. How do you work on it? I feel it's a huge work to make sure that the quality is the same across all the people you work with.
You're absolutely right. And just to make that challenge even harder, I can share that oftentimes the person that we are coordinating with at the client side is not even the one who needs the interpreter, right? It is the administrative assistant of that person, or it is a research broker of that person. So it is a constant challenge. For us, I come back to a simple mantra. I want my community to understand how the world works, because I believe that if they are intellectually curious, if they follow financial markets, they will have enough context to the point where they are sitting on a call with a mutual fund out of Singapore and they know the business objective of that mutual fund, but then they get called to join a call from a Japanese private equity firm and their understanding of the context that they need. Now that's the aspiration. The reality is we're not there yet in terms of getting everyone up to that common level of knowledge. So our big initiative for 2019 and probably 2020 is helping increase the skills of a lot of our community. And that's something we'll be doing very shortly, and I'm quite excited about.
How was your vision on executing this plan to increase the skills?
So we want to be the first interpretation company that is trying to increase the domain knowledge of our community. So we're not trying to make people better translators or interpreters. We're trying to help them better understand the financial markets. So we're doing a call on Zoom. Just today, Zoom had their IPO. If I were to ask 100 interpreters, well, how do IPOs work? What does that mean? If you were asked to interpret for a quote unquote IPO roadshow, do you know what that means? So we intend to focus on that vocabulary and that context. The means that we're going to deliver will be some form of online learning. Perhaps you and I can chat afterwards. Maybe you've got some tips of good platforms or resources for that.
Does it mean that you select them through a Q&A and you score them in terms of industrial knowledge or domain knowledge?
That's the idea, right? That there are people who we can tell just from their CV that they have a very strong interpretation background, but then it comes down to the domain knowledge. And I'm a fan of your podcast. I was listening to Pauline's interview that you did from My CV Factory, right? I think she has a similar aspiration, right? Of making people have their best foot forward and then giving employers a kind of faster route to understand how best to use them. So very much our intention as well.
I see. Yeah, I think she's facing a similar challenge. When I see your post, because we are connected on LinkedIn, I don't know, maybe other social media, I see that you're emphasizing a lot on prominent people you have or companies you have offered your services to. I feel that's very, very smart marketing. Could be a very, very strong marketing that you have offered services for someone who is very famous for in the financial market, a manager of hedge fund or a politician or whoever is famous. What are your marketing strategies in order to scale your business? Because you get I can't remember the number, but it's like 300-400 requests per month. So I understand that some clients can come every month, but I believe that you are onboarding new clients every month at the same time. Could you share a bit more about your marketing strategies and your client acquisition strategies?
Absolutely. So marketing strategy for us is simple. We want to be the brand authority when it comes to due diligence for cross-border activity. To our great surprise, this was a surprisingly open space. You know, there are many firms that tell you how to do business in China, but they're pushing their own agenda. There are many consulting firms that help you get things done, but there's no one as laser focused as we are. And so by publishing often about international due diligence, we hope to be top of mind. Now, remember, we're marketing to two audiences. We have our clients and our linguists. So we try on the linguist side to have that same content be wrapped around messaging of this is going to make your career more lucrative. This is going to give you more interesting assignments. But really, it all comes down to having a content strategy and thinking about where can we get referrals from, right? What actions can we take that inspire someone so much that they're going to give us referrals? Because it is our most profitable marketing channel, you know, in the last few years for sure.
I see. Have you tried to scale this referral program through incentives, through gatherings, through any methodology?
We've tried the traditional SaaS model of refer a friend and get a $100 Amazon gift card or whatnot, and that backfired, to be honest. Right, our service is such that that doesn't do justice to what we try to do. So instead, it's more bespoke. So we're tracking who's making referrals. We're sending them kind of small gifts. We're trying to do meetups whenever I travel, take folks out to dinner, that sort of thing in terms of referrals. I imagine similar to your business, right? Consulting is all about, or it's accelerated by referrals kind of at all levels.
Clearly. You co-funded the company. Could you tell us more about your co-funders and how you met them? What's the origin? How you began to work together? A bit more understanding how you began for the audience who could project themselves in your story.
Absolutely. So myself, you know, I came from the due diligence world where that was my entire career up to the point I moved to China. I had very limited knowledge of the interpretation translation world. So when I landed in Beijing, I of course Googled to see who was good at it. Found a gentleman, Jonathan Rechtman, who at the time was a freelancer, kind of, scaling up his own reputation and doing all sorts of fascinating assignments. And I pitched him on this idea of, okay, well, what if we could have a platform to expand this, increase the reach of what we're trying to do, not have it be structured as a traditional agency, which quite frankly functions like a guild, but instead do something a little more thoughtful. And since we were both in Beijing, we took a leap of faith together. And colloquially, he knows the supply side extremely well. I know the demand side extremely well. But the importance of having a co-founder is really hard to understate throughout the whole entrepreneurial process. So if Jonathan were here in LA with me, he'd be sitting right over here. Okay. But he's based in Beijing, so he kind of looks after a lot of our activity and partnerships from Beijing.
That's a question I wanted to ask. How do you manage? I know it's pretty new that you have two offices, as I understand, LA and Beijing. How do you manage so far the different locations? And secondly, I see that you're also in New York. Los Angeles, New York, and Beijing. How do you manage all the locations? And what's your plan for all those locations? Different functions, sales rep. One is more operation, one is more sales. Would you mind sharing about this location and its use?
Absolutely, and I think first and foremost, company culture is the most important thing to the long-term success of any business. And so I was very nervous when we decided to set up multiple geographies, and then for myself as CEO to not be the same geography as the majority of our caddies, as they are called. So for us, one of the core tenets is we want to have every caddy go through the same experience, which for us is equivalent to how when you join Google or Twilio, you have to code a little app before they let you into your job. So we like to have people in that matchmaking pilot seat that we just discussed. So for example, our head of marketing had to spend 3 months just matchmaking to get some sympathy and empathy for what our clients go through, for what our other employees go through. So with that in mind, we do hope to build a common culture across our offices. Now, we've made a lot of mistakes. I'm sure I'm gonna make several more, but that is the intention. I will say, the Beijing team has done a tremendous job staying up overnight because we serve clients around the globe, and we not yet have folks in LA or New York to serve people in that time zone. So we had some very, very brave people agree to do the overnight shift in Beijing. So it was good during our startup phase, and I'm eager to transition it into something more sustainable.
Yeah, how do you communicate on those constraints? Like people joining you may have to stay up very late at night. How do you compensate them? How do you work on those challenges?
So really, it's trying to figure out what's a good fit for their careers and then put them on a path to support that. So for example, the team that is supporting our North American and South American clients are themselves Westerners. And so they do aspire to take all the relationships they're building with Cadence and at some point capitalize on those, right? And go back to their home territories. And then also it is a matter of compensation, right? People who are hungrier and willing to work overnight, they definitely get a compensation bump, but that isn't sustainable. So really it's trying to find someone who is based in a country that might not be where they want to stay long-term. And so we, for example, provide an English-speaking office that allows you to work with Western clients. You just have to work overnight. So that fits very well for some people's careers. And we were fortunate enough to find some very talented people to fill out that team. Okay.
About culture, how you build your culture, and have you used some resources for inspiration? I feel actually when we think about companies, we always think about the product and we think less about the culture. But at the end of the day, a company is developed by people, and what's uniting people is culture. And now the word culture is more and more used in companies, but actually I feel more and more I've developed my own business, that culture is at the essence, at one of the most important things in a company. Could you share more about your principles? Maybe you have values, company values, and how you have built your culture.
Absolutely. And I think, as CEO, that is my one and most important job, right? Is to look out after that, inspire people to build and live a culture that we all want. So for us, number one company value I'll share with you is win the referral. So this idea that you need to spark someone's enthusiasm for what they need, either on the supply side as a linguist or on the demand side as a client, and just make them happy. And so day one, when employees join, I take them through an overview of our culture, and I emphasize that that's value number one. The second thing I would mention is that you really need to find people that are intellectually curious. So in Beijing, for example, we have a pretty diverse set of folks. This week is the Indonesian presidential election. And I bring that up because we have one Indonesian and two Malaysians in our team. And I love the fact that they're talking about current events, and therefore, how will that affect financial markets? And then therefore, how will that affect our clients? And so from a culture perspective, finding people passionate about winning a referral, finding people passionate about how the world works is what we aim to do. And really, I think what makes us sustainable.
I see. Some people say in a company you need to build a vision, you need to build build values. But what has been your process in building them? Is it your own thinking, your own personality? Is it because you observe that people within your team were curious, and actually your clients were working well with curious people? How did you build it? I feel from my experience that a lot of entrepreneurs build their values on their own personality more than the observation of what the clients like, what the clients are looking for, and what the team who is working well has values. What was your process?
Sure. Well, I have a lot of personality traits that I hope I have not imparted on our culture. And instead, I try to point our team towards organizations whose culture I admire, and try to connect the dots for them between the success that these companies have had and the culture that underpinned that. So for example, in the professional services world, there's a very competitive market known as expert networks. There's a bunch of them in China. There's a bunch all over the world. And we've observed that the culture of these expert networks is very different. And you could almost predict market share changes based on the Glassdoor reviews of these different organizations, right? So companies that numerically get good scores for employee satisfaction, we've noticed, are just capturing market share. And that, to me, is a causation, not a correlation. So for the 22-year-olds that make up the majority of our entry-level employees, we are their first professional services firm, certainly their first Western one. And so instead of it being the chairman giving what the vision is, instead, I like to just point people to organizations that inspire me, and ideally that they will get exposure to, and just have them emulate all of the things that we notice those firms doing.
I see. Talking about inspiration, what books have inspired you on developing your business? I think one of the topic I feel which is very close to your topic is about remote working, because you have so many linguists that are working from their own location, that knowing more about how to manage remote working is certainly one topic you have looked into. Could you share some books that have inspired you in developing your business? And more specifically, I'd like I would be interested to know how you conceived and thought about remote working.
Sure. So one, to the point of organizations whose culture I admire, this isn't a very beloved company, but let's talk about ExxonMobil, the giant oil company. There was a book written about 6 years ago called Private Empire, which talked about how incredibly focused of a firm ExxonMobil is, and how they really try to look at the future in terms of geopolitics, economics, et cetera, and bring that back to, okay, well, how do we configure our operations to thrive in that future? And to some extent, that's what we like to do, is we like to say, okay, well, AI and technology is coming. How are we going to adapt in a world where your iPhone is going to get you through 90% of business meetings, but you're going to need some solution for that other 10%? We look at a world where, okay, the US-China trade war is going to shift investors' attention to different parts of the world. So how do we adapt to that? So that narrative and that book really inspired me to just have it discipline, right, at the organizational level, and have almost like a think tank mentality of trying to look in the future. Now, to your question about remote workers, there's no one resource, I think, that has really inspired that. I will say both our offices in LA and Beijing are in WeWorks, and I do think that to some extent demographics are on our side, and that we are going to get more remote workers, where if, for example, we said, hey, Cadence has a 4-room studio at 20 WeWorks around the world, so you can be a remote worker in Tokyo or Seoul, but wouldn't you like to just, whenever you have a call with us, do it in the comfort of this nice office without having all the burdens of having an office job? That's an experiment, that's a hypothesis, but I do think in terms of remote workers, that is the direction we want to move towards, and to some extent, we are seeing happen already.
Okay, talking about the books of the private empire, talking about Exxon, if I'm correct.
Yes.
I feel what you say that Exxon is managing the company based on more macroeconomic trends like geopolitics, demographics, and so on. How, as a startup, as a small to medium business, can you get inspired by methodologies that are used by such a big company? The correlation I see already is about the languages. You may see Indonesia growing, or political uncertainty in somewhere. So a need of more translators because you are serving financial markets where uncertainty is key for them. Could you share more and tell me if I'm correct about the analysis I just had?
You are correct, right? So much of this is, as a global business, trying to get ahead of the trends for where investor due diligence is focused on. And there's also this mindset of consumption of news, trying to connect patterns. That's something that Exxon does at a massive scale, and that I would like us to do at a much smaller scale. So one idea of implementing that we've done is allow people to give stock picks, right? If we ask people to kind of publicly say, you know what, I really like this company. If I had $1 million, I would put it in this company. And just the act of putting a stake in the ground and saying, I believe in this, forces each other to question that logic or to learn from it, that type of thing. So we fully joked that we would run a kind of side investment vehicle for our employees based on their ideas. Clearly, we're not doing that. But again, kind of taking that big company mentality of looking into the future, we try to implement it at very small scale with things like that.
I see. To be a bit more China specific for the end, what are the specific difficulties you have witnessed in starting a business in China and developing it?
Well, can we do another 2 hours? I think it might take 2 hours for me to go through this. First one is talent, right? It's for a country of so many ambitious, intelligent people, as a Westerner, to try to build a pipeline of talent is challenging, right? When I talked about my co-founder, Jonathan, you can infer from his last name, Rechtman, that he's not Chinese. So the two of us really had an uphill battle in terms of thinking, well, how do we create a sustainable hiring process, et cetera? Do we try to embrace some Chinese methodologies, or do we try to import Western or Silicon Valley ones? Second to that is just the basics of running a small business that has Western clients. So payment processing, our CRM, Salesforce, right? Just a lot of these basic issues reduces the productivity of China-based employees tremendously through no fault of their own, and with limited ability for us to improve that. I could go on and on, but those are the two big ones.
So in China, you have a Woofy, you have your own company, and you also have companies in the US, I believe, right?
That's right. So parent company is in the US, and we have a China Woofy that took us a year and a half to to get permitted and whatnot. But yeah, that's our structure.
Okay. Talking about China-specific challenges in translation within your industry, what do you feel it's specifically more difficult to serve your clients in the Chinese market?
Great question. Number one, I would say would be compliance. So by this, I mean, there's this concept of material non-public information. So in the 5,000 investor calls that I mentioned earlier, the number one commandment is thou shalt not reveal material non-public information. And for better or for worse, in China, there's less respect for that concept. And so it can put our interpreters in a very awkward spot if they're facilitating a conversation and it appears as if insider information is coming out, or if, God forbid, someone who we invited into one of these conversations, solicited inside information or did something with that. And so for our world, the biggest challenge is not the nuance of the language or, putting the business card or the WeChat correct. It's compliance and the respect with which it deserves to be treated.
So how do you solve this issue? Do you train people you are going to be in touch with? Do you warn them before the call, before the talk is starting?
We do all that we can. So we really try to look at their background and get a sense of, were they trained in institutions that emphasize ethics? Are they aware of what even constitutes insider information? And to what extent, where in their career are they, such that they would understand the implications of it? We do mention that, people go to jail for trading on insider information, both in the US and in China. And that in the privilege that they're being given, there's serious repercussions for not doing it. But it's an endless challenge. And, I live in fear that it just takes one little slip up and a whole house of cards can collapse, not just our company, but all of the research brokers that are out there that facilitate those 5,000 phone calls. So it's something that, we can only give sticks. We can't give carrots for this particular issue.
Yeah, it reminds me of my first business. I was managing a gift box business, and inside the gift box, we were selling scuba diving, paragliding, skydiving, driving a luxury car, and you can imagine how stressful it can be to make sure that they have the right insurance. I feel it, and the Chinese market, you can understand that it's not as mature as can be the US or Europe, where everyone is insured, otherwise you cannot start your business, you cannot run it. So I fully understand what you're talking about. Again, to talk a bit more about China, what resources do you use to be up to date about China, and what books would you recommend?
Great question. So, again, I'm going to come back to this theme of financial markets because I tend to look more at what the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times is covering in China, which I completely understand is a very skewed perspective from the Western side. So try to complement that by just asking the local team members, what are they reading, trying to provoke some of those discussions. In terms of books, the adage that by the time you write a book on China, it's already kind of out of date. Can certainly be true. One resource I will direct your listeners' attention to is this fantastic website called Muddy Waters. It's a great and evocative name, and it is a research firm that uncovers accounting fraud or just bad actors in China, and they will target publicly traded companies and say, hey, Sino Forest, I'm pretty sure you guys are cooking the books. We are going to publish our research findings on you publicly. So I would highly recommend reading those reports. They give a fascinating view as to how kind of the Chinese stock market and all of the auditors and that ecosystem come together. All their work is free, and it's just a good name, Muddy Waters. So,
focusing on China.
Yeah, all they do, they may expand, but all they do is focus on Chinese companies. So it could be Chinese companies that are listed in China. It could be Chinese companies that are listed overseas.
I see.
The fact that they write in English, but they're analyzing the China market is really quite compelling.
I see.
Yeah.
I have the same feeling that books about China are so quickly out of date that it's very difficult to recommend one, except about history of China.
Sure.
It's difficult to find a good one. Thank you very much, Matt, for being with us. Very insightful. I discovered a lot more through the interview about Cadence. Do I pronounce correctly, Cadence?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to meeting up when we're both in the same city soon.
Yeah, hopefully soon. Thank you.
All right, cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.